Whispering Pines was supposed to be quiet. That's why I moved there. Clean sidewalks, HOA-mandated grass lengths, and the kind of silence you can sip coffee to. After 20 years of contracting for private defense firms, I was ready for a break from the noise, both literal and political. Instead, I found Karen Blevins. Lot 12. Pink shutters. White stone landscaping. A plastic flamingo that somehow passed HOA decor guidelines. Karen was president of the Homeowners Association and acted like she ran a gated utopia. She handed out citations like candy, window screens too dusty, $50 fine, garage door left open overnight, $100. Once, she dinged me for excessively decorative lighting because I left a solar lantern out past Halloween. She smiled when she handed me the ticket. That fake, step-forward smile that never reached her eyes. I hated her on sight. It wasn't just me. Everyone hated her, but no one said anything. Karen had been HOA president for 6 years and knew how to twist bylaws like balloon animals. She manipulated votes, harassed dissenters, and somehow never violated a single rule, at least on paper. Then my electric bill came in. It was 40% higher than the month before. I barely use anything. I live alone, no kids, no wild parties, and I line dry my laundry. At first, I thought it was a utility error. Then, out of habit more than paranoia, I pulled up my energy monitor logs. One outdoor outlet had been drawing power nearly every night, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. The plug on the west side of my house. The one I hadn't touched since Christmas. I installed a cheap motion-triggered camera. That night, I sat in the dark with my tablet, watching. At 10:14 p.m., a figure crept across the lawn. Blonde ponytail. Track suit. She unspooled a black extension cord and plugged it into my wall socket like she owned it. Then she walked back into the dark. I blinked. Karen was stealing my electricity. I watched the footage again. The cord led into her garage, and when the door lifted briefly, I saw it. A gleaming red ATV. Chrome-trimmed, oversized battery pack, extra lights along the roll cage. That thing was a power hog. She didn't have an outdoor outlet of her own, and installing one would mean filing for HOA approval she herself had to process. Apparently, abusing her authority wasn't enough. She had to feed her toy on someone else's dime. I stared at the frozen image on my screen. My jaw clenched. Karen was the queen of citations and condescension, yet here she was, stealing. The next morning, I walked across the cul-de-sac to her castle at Lot 12. She opened the door in pastel pink, sipping an iced coffee like she hadn't trespassed the night before. "I know," I said, holding up my phone. "I have video." Her lips tightened. Then she smiled, syrupy sweet. "You must be mistaken. I'd never plug into someone else's outlet. That's outrageous. Want to watch the footage?" She hesitated. A flicker of fear passed through her eyes. Then she shrugged. "Even if it were true," she said coolly, "I'm sure we could resolve it privately. No need to create tension in the neighborhood." I raised an eyebrow. "Privately? As in, sweep it under the rug?" She dropped the smile. "You're new here, Derek. This neighborhood values peace. Don't stir up trouble." With that, she closed the door in my face. That night, I disconnected the outlet. I watched her slink across the lawn at 10:12 p.m., only to find the socket dead. She frowned, checked the plug, then stomped back home. But that didn't stop her. 3 nights later, she snaked a cord from a new angle, tapped into the same circuit from my back patio, where I hadn't yet installed cameras. I realized something then. This wasn't ignorance. It was entitlement. Karen believed she could do whatever she wanted, so long as everyone else played by her rules. That's when I stopped being annoyed and started planning. Because if Karen wanted to play games with power, she'd picked the wrong neighbor to steal from. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Karen's smug expression and that thick black cord slithering across my lawn like a parasite. I'd caught her once, cut off her access, and still, she found another way to feed her ATV from my grid. Brazen. Unapologetic. She didn't just break the rules. She treated them like a weapon, and I was the new target in her crosshairs. So I did what any logical man would do. I documented everything. Motion sensor footage, energy logs, time-stamped images of the extension cord creeping into my outlets. I compiled it all into a neat folder and marched straight into the next HOA meeting. Karen, as usual, sat at the head of the long community table like a monarch holding court. Her clipboard was color-coded, and her smile was sharpened to a razor's edge. "Derek," she said, looking up as I approached the open floor. "Concerns?" I stepped forward, plugged my USB into the community room monitor, and brought up the video. The footage played in silence, Karen plugging into my outdoor outlet, the cord slinking back toward her garage, the ATV humming beneath the cracked door. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably. A few gasped. Karen didn't move. When the video ended, I turned to face her. "I believe this is a clear violation of community property guidelines," I said. "Specifically, unlawful utility use and unauthorized access to another resident's home." Karen set down her clipboard. "What's more concerning," she said, voice dripping with false calm, "is that Derek has apparently installed surveillance equipment aimed at private property. That raises privacy concerns and potential HOA violations." Murmurs rippled through the room. I opened my mouth to object, but she raised a hand and clicked her pen. "I'll take this under advisement," she said smoothly. "In the meantime, I must inform you, Derek, that I received 2 anonymous complaints about unauthorized wiring on your property. Specifically, tampering with common electrical lines."
What?
I blinked. What are you talking about?" "We had an electrician review your setup," she continued, producing a paper with a stamped letterhead. "His report indicates possible code violations. Based on that, the board is issuing a $500 fine, and your voting privileges are suspended until the matter is resolved." It hit me like a punch to the chest. She had flipped the entire thing, turned her theft into my offense, and she had the clout to make it stick. The so-called electrician? Likely a friend, or someone on her payroll. The anonymous complaints? Her own fabrication. I was furious, but I kept my face still, because in that moment, I saw her clearly. Karen didn't just operate through fear. She thrived on it. Her power wasn't in enforcing the rules, it was in weaponizing them. Twisting technicalities. Bending truth. Making people doubt what they saw with their own eyes. That night, I sat in my garage, surrounded by tools and blueprints. My old habits kicked in, the ones from long nights on military contracts where failure wasn't an option. Circuits. Relays. Decoys. Triggers. I didn't want destruction. I wanted precision. I wasn't going to break anything. I was going to prove everything. I designed a trap, not malicious, not illegal. A passive system that would detect when the outlet was used and reroute the energy through a dummy load, causing a harmless feedback loop. It would trip any poorly grounded device connected to it, while logging the exact time and load attempt. It wouldn't damage the ATV, but it would stop it cold. I had the parts. I had the skills. And now I had a reason. The next morning, I stood at my side yard, staring at the outlet Karen had used so many times. I drilled into the siding, snaked in my new wiring, and sealed the box like it had never been touched. A trap laid not in malice, but in method. Because Karen didn't just steal my electricity, she tried to steal my credibility, my integrity, and I was going to take hers apart one circuit at a time. Karen didn't wait long to test me again. 3 nights after the HOA meeting, the alert came through, silent, just a vibration on my phone at 10:18 p.m. The moment she plugged in, my system registered the load. The modified outlet detected the pull, redirected the current through the feedback loop, and triggered a soft fail. 10 minutes later, another alert. Voltage spike on the line, harmless to my system, but not to hers. I switched to the camera feed and leaned forward. The extension cord, once taut and proud, now lay limp and lifeless on the grass. Across the cul-de-sac, Karen's garage door opened in a slow, mechanical groan. She stormed out in her robe, squatted beside the ATV, and began yanking at the power cord like it had personally betrayed her. Inside her garage, the ATV's console lights flickered erratically, then went dark. She tried the ignition. Nothing. I smiled. The trap worked flawlessly. I hadn't damaged her ATV, just forced its system to reject the unstable input. Most people wouldn't even know what had happened. But Karen wasn't most people. She'd know it wasn't a coincidence. And she'd know exactly who'd done it. The next morning, I didn't have to wait long. She marched across my lawn without knocking, fists clenched, her usual composure shredded. I opened the door before she could pound on it. "You think you're clever?" she hissed. "You sabotaged my property." I leaned on the doorframe. "I protected mine." "You tampered with a shared system." "Incorrect. My outlet. My wiring. And I've documented every unauthorized connection. Photos, video, timestamps. Want to see them again?" Her face contorted, caught between fury and fear. "You're making a mistake," she spat. "Funny. That's what you said last time." She didn't argue further. She turned and stormed off, but not before muttering, "You'll regret this." Her tone wasn't empty. By noon, I received a notice from the HOA. Another fine, this time for creating a hazardous condition on community property. She claimed her ATV's battery had been fried by malicious electrical tampering and suggested I had installed some kind of booby trap. She included pictures of her ATV's dash, blinking lights, error codes, taken just before she towed it to a local repair shop. The board didn't respond directly, but the notice was enough to enrage me. I appealed. Formally. Submitted a response packet with every log, every video file, and a diagram of the device I'd installed. Engineered for safety, fully contained, and not in violation of any residential electrical code. But I didn't stop there. I sent the same packet to the County Energy Fraud Unit. Utility theft was no joke. And Karen had committed it, repeatedly and without remorse. More importantly, she had used her position in the HOA to retaliate against the person who caught her. That was corruption, and I made sure every word of my report was razor-sharp. 2 days later, I got a call from a quiet-voiced man with the county utilities office. He had questions. I answered every one. "I'm impressed," he said at the end. "Most people wouldn't go to this length. This is rock solid. We'll be in touch." That evening, I sat on my porch, drink in hand, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Karen hadn't emerged all day. No sightings. No citations in mailboxes. The HOA bulletin board remained untouched. But it wasn't over. Not yet. I could feel it in the air, like the seconds before a storm. The trap had worked. The evidence was delivered. But Karen wasn't the type to fold quietly. Still, for the first time since I moved into Whispering Pines, I felt like I had the high ground. She'd come for me with half-truths and forged complaints. Now I had something she couldn't manipulate. Facts. And power she couldn't steal. The storm arrived 5 days later, though not the kind that comes with thunder. 2 unmarked county vehicles rolled quietly into Whispering Pines just after 10 a.m. A man and woman stepped out in plain clothes, clipboards in hand, their demeanor sharp and unreadable. They didn't knock on my door. They knocked on Karen's. I watched from my upstairs window as she opened the door, wearing that same pastel cardigan she wore to every HOA meeting, as if politeness could hide the rot underneath. Her smile faltered when she saw their badges. There were no hugs, no handshakes, just business. She tried to block the doorway. She failed. By noon, a tow truck had rolled up the driveway of Lot 12, her busted red ATV chained to its bed. A county vehicle followed, escorting it away like a fallen soldier. Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed, lips tight, fury simmering beneath her frozen face. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The HOA meeting that evening was packed, more than I'd ever seen. Whispering Pines residents filled every chair, some standing along the back wall. Karen hadn't called the meeting, but word had spread like wildfire. I sat 3 rows from the front, calm and composed. When Karen entered, the room fell silent. She looked smaller than usual, drained of her smug certainty. "I'd like to address the board," she said tightly, stepping up to the podium. But before she could speak, A tall man with silver-rimmed glasses raised a hand. I think we should hear from Derek first. That got a round of nods. Karen's eyes snapped to me, venomous, but she said nothing. I stood and walked to the front. No theatrics. No anger. I moved here for peace, I began, my voice steady. But peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from accountability. I laid it all out. The theft, the retaliation, the manipulated fines, the evidence. I didn't need emotion. Facts were heavier when they stood alone. Karen's rebuttal was brief, scattered, desperate. She claimed confusion, suggested technical misunderstandings, blamed me for overreacting. But it didn't land.
Not this time.
Someone from the third row stood up. It was Marla from Lot 8. She'd once received 3 citations in a month for having a non-neutral mailbox color. I believe him, she said, voice firm. And I'm tired of being afraid to speak. More followed. One by one, neighbors began sharing their stories, small abuses of power, all tied to Karen. Fines for things that never existed. Altered meeting notes. Suddenly, the pieces snapped together like a puzzle long hidden. The board called for an emergency vote. By the end of the hour, Karen Blevins was formally removed from her position as HOA president. She didn't speak as she packed her clipboard. She didn't look at anyone as she walked out the door. I stayed behind, watching the minutes of the meeting being typed into the record. Something inside me eased, not just satisfaction, but relief. The neighborhood exhaled. Tension I hadn't known I carried began to dissolve. The following week, a new HOA president was elected, Brian Tran, a retired architect with no tolerance for drama and a fondness for fair play. One of his first acts was to nullify every fine Karen had issued in the past 6 months and reevaluate the complaints she filed under false pretenses. He also had the faulty citation against me officially removed and my voting privileges restored. 2 weeks later, Karen put her house on the market. She moved out quietly, no goodbye parties, no final power plays. Just a U-Haul and a bitter glare as she pulled away from Lot 12 for the last time. And that outlet she used to steal from? I replaced it with a solar charger for my tools. Clean, efficient, untouchable. Funny thing about people like Karen, they crave control, but once you take away the illusion, they crumble. Whispering Pines is quiet again. This time, for the right reasons.